Hi there everybody, this is David, and I just love it whenever I stumble across like a fantastic indie RPG. And we've been getting a lot of them lately, but they always kind of seem to be inspired by the exact same games. You know, Earthbound, Final Fantasy, or Chrono Trigger. But not this one. Elohim Eternal 2 Son of Man asks, what if Xenogears and then Shin Megami Tensei got together and then rewrote the actual Bible? Yeah, I know. And in today's sponsored video, I do want to tell you all about the game, and I definitely do think that's worth a sub and a like as you come and join my party and level on up with me. Now, let me get this out of the way. The storyline is wild, and it's not for the faint of heart either. You're going to be running into like Mary Magdalene as she finishes off a customer, if you know what I mean, as well as John the Baptist, Lazarus, Simon Peter, and more. I mean, you even play as Judas, for God's sakes. So if that sounds up your alley, let's dive right on in to this apocryphal tale. Elohim Eternal 2 wears its inspirations proudly on its sleeve. Shin Megami Tensei for the bleak post-apocalyptic setting, Xenogears for the introspection, spirituality, mechs, and monologues, and well, you know, the Bible, yeah, the Bible for everything else, I guess. The game opens a few years after the apocalyptic event called the Time of Tribulation, which essentially ensured that the lower-class Sumerians stayed in their place. You can think of them as the Sumerians of the Bible, which were shunned. Well, the Pluramans rule over them in a theocracy, and you can think of them as kind of like the Pharisees of the Bible. And you and your mother Mary are wandering destitute throughout Nazareth, only to be taken in by Joseph. And while you're raised along with his son Judas, 14 years go by, and then you're both teenagers, and here's where the game really opens up, because you're out to make a name for yourselves and free the Sumerians, who run a ragtag resistance group known as the Zealots, which you and your brother Judas want to join. Oh, and if you didn't figure it out already, you're the Messiah, you know, Jesus himself. Or in this case, Jesse. I mean, Mary is your mother after all, and Joseph your father. Yeah, I told you there were tons of parallels here. So anyway, I don't want to go too deep into the story here because there is a lot. But it turns out that over the years your mother Mary was kidnapped, along with many other Sumerians, and they were taken away to the sanctuary, never to return, because they're secretly being turned into archons, or mechanical monstrous beings. So it's your job to join up with those zealots, free the Sumerians from Pluraman rule, find out the whereabouts of your mother, and save the people. Which should be a cakewalk. I mean, you're the Messiah, after all. What could possibly go wrong? The writing itself is solid, though it does start off slow. This is a story-first RPG, and it's not shy about that. There are tons of cutscenes. So many, in fact, that the game will literally prompt you to save in between cutscenes. There is that Xenogears influence. Thankfully, there's no hard fail state. If you lose a fight, you can just try it again, or skip it entirely. And the game also seems to understand that the audience is probably here for the characters and the philosophical weirdness more than the punishment. So there is a story mode that you can turn on at any time, which will get rid of all the fighting entirely. Though once you do turn that on, you can never turn it off. This isn't just like your basic RPG Maker indie though. Elohim Eternal 2 has some neat tricks up its sleeve. It really encourages exploration, as talking to NPCs will give you experience points. There are heart-to-heart moments, which you can think of like the heart-to-hearts over in Xenoblade. And these are like little character bonding scenes that give you talent points and more experience points. And the talent points are basically like a currency that you can spend in shops for permanent stat boosts. Then there are testaments that you can find and discover, which are little snippets of their holy book, which explain the world in more detail, and of course, give you tangible rewards for finding as well. Combat is turn-based with a twist. Think Octopath Traveler meets Legend of Dragoon with some Xenogears thrown in for good measure. Remember how in Legend of Dragoon, if you defended, you gained 10% of your HP? Well, here it's kind of similar, because if you defend, you recover a bit of your AP, which are essentially your magical points or ability points. And you can use a scanner to find enemy weaknesses, which doesn't cost a turn. Then underneath each monster, you'll see a bar for their HP levels, as well as like a little box which will indicate what their weaknesses are. Whether they're weak to a particular weapon type or a magical type, it will show up here, just like in Octopath Traveler. And whenever you hit an enemy's weakness, a little circle will appear, kind of like in Legend of Dragoon. and the closer that you hit the A button to the very center of that circle, the more extra damage that you can deal, just like the additions. Not only that, but all of your health and energy is restored after every single battle, which really does encourage you to go all out in every stance of combat. You don't necessarily gain magical spells here through like leveling up or anything else like that. Instead, it's handled through ether weapons, which are guns that you'll find in treasure chests that hit for massive damage and can also cause status effects like paralyze, poison, or burn. And each time that you use one of those weapons, it'll cost 1 AP point, and you begin each battle with 3 AP points. Not only do the ether weapons deal status effects, but even your regular weapons can inflict status debuffs, like attack or defense down. In addition to the AP points, there's also TP, which is used for some of your special skills and your heavy weaponry. You can kind of think of it like the IP system in Lufia 2. The more you're hit, the more TP you'll earn, which you can then in turn spend on your more powerful skills. All the monsters do appear on screen, there are no random encounters here, and the monsters will not respawn unless you force them to at certain points in dungeons. And not only that, you can also save anywhere. All of this is a huge quality of life win, especially with how dialogue heavy this game can be. Now, I did say that the combat has a Xenogears influence, and that's because of the Azars, or the giant mechs or Xenogears in this case. They're the giant machines with unique combat systems, different programs, and new mechanics for fights. Here, you fight with techniques and programs which can deal massive damage against the other Azars. It reminded me a ton of fighting in the Gears and Xenogears, as well as like fighting with Valimar in the Trails of Cold Steel series. One thing that I did want to point out though is that unlike video game series such as Final Fantasy or the Tales of series, the Elohim Eternal series follows an overarching plot, similar to the Trails of Cold Steel series. However, each game does present its own complete story, as they all take place on a different planet, but inside the same solar system, kind of like the Phantasy Star series back on Sega. Yeah, this is referencing a ton of great classics. Now don't get me wrong, there are some rough edges. This is an indie game after all, but it's also packed with ambition, personality, and that beautiful late 90s RPG spirit. The kind that isn't afraid to throw 6 new terms at you in one sentence and still expect you to keep up. And somehow, you will, because you'll be hooked to this. Elohim Eternal 2 Son of Man is not subtle, it is dense and it's wordy. But if you've been craving something bold, something that isn't afraid to be deeply spiritual and mechanically experimental, then this game definitely deserves a spot on your radar. It's part scripture, part strategy, but all heart. And if you grew up loving the messy genius of Xenogears and Shin Megami Tensei, or any of the other plethora of games that I've mentioned here, like Phantasy Star, Octopath Traveler, Legend of Dragoon, all those great games, then there is a real chance that this here is going to hit you right in the soul. Thank you all so much for watching, and please let me know how you feel about this in the comments. And if you just love getting into a giant mech and, beating the ever-loving crap out of all your enemies, then be sure to leave a like and a sub for some more great RPG recommendations. Thanks so much for watching, this has been David, and as always, have a good day.